Hi, this is Reverend Dr. Bob Thompson, RD Bob T for short, trying very hard to do this particular bonus question without looking like I'm reading, but I actually am reading. And my wife said, like, why you just read? So if you'd prefer to have a script of what I'm getting ready to say, then just email me at rdbobt@gmail.com, and I will be glad to send it to you. So the second bonus question related to our Bible survey in Brunswick Forest, which is a community in Leland, North Carolina, is why is Israel such a big deal? And what raises this question is that this past week we had a survey of the entire Old Testament, and all of the Old Testament except the first 11 chapters of Genesis are directly about the rise and fall of Israel. Even when you get to the New Testament, everything in the New Testament, from the birth of Jesus to the end of the book of Revelation, assumes that the New Testament itself is the continuation and fulfillment of the story of Israel. And then, of course, in our own time and for the last century or more, Israel has occupied global attention that far outsizes its land and its population. So these two factors, the centrality of Israel in the Bible and the ongoing importance of Israel in the modern world, raise this week's bonus question in our survey of the Bible. Why is Israel such a big deal? And to answer that question, I've summarized some of my own reading and thoughts, but also sought input from friends and family who are Jewish or have strong Jewish connections. And here's what we've come up with. So there are 10 reasons Israel is such a big deal. I'm going to give you one word for each of the 10 reasons. But again, if you want more, just email me for the script. So, first of all, the word chosen. The Bible storyline is clear that God's plan to save the world from itself revolves around the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. God promises Abraham in Genesis 12 that he will be blessed and that his descendants will be a great nation, and that through that nation, which is going to be Israel, all nations of the world will be blessed. In Romans chapter 9, the Apostle Paul is expressing deep anguish over Israel and their lack of response to Jesus. But in doing so, he describes Israel this way: theirs is the adoption to sonship, there's the divine glory, there's the covenants, there's the receiving of the law, the temple worship, and the promises. So many blessings that Israel has. So the second word after chosen is faithfulness. So Moses clarifies in Deuteronomy 7 that this chosenness is really not about Israel, it's about God. The Lord did not set his affection on you or choose you because you were more numerous than other peoples, Moses tells the Israelites, for you were the fewest of all peoples. But it was because the Lord loved you and kept the oath he swore to your ancestors that he brought you out with a mighty hand and redeemed you from the land of slavery, from the power of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. So, why is Israel such a big deal? Because God is faithful to his promises. Third reason Israel is such a big deal is because of genocide. Well, it's true that Jews committed genocide in the Bible, and I'll be addressing that question in a future YouTube video. Some today also accuse the modern state of Israel of genocidal intent toward the Palestinians. Let's go back to the centuries, the last, 40 centuries? It's nevertheless true that no ethnic group in world history has experienced more attempts to exterminate it locally or globally than the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The Jewish population a century before the birth of Christ was roughly equal to the Chinese population. The massive population differential today between Jews and Chinese is mostly due to genocides throughout history. So, a significant part of understanding Israel's wars in the modern era, including the new one, the current one, can be summarized in two words: never again. These genocides have contributed negatively to the ongoing centrality of Jews, that is, negative publicity, but they are also the reason there are Jews all over the world, a factor labeled the diaspora, which may in part be why there's still a Jewish race today, that determination to survive, including being scattered all over the world. The fourth reason that Jews are such a big deal is holiness. The 20th century British journalist William Norman Ewer is credited with the epigram, How Odd of God to Choose the Jews. And Jews have responded with a little ditty of their own, like, but not so odd as those who choose a Jewish God to spurn the Jews. Jews often self identify as an unusual people, maybe even an odd people, if you want to use that word, distinctive and special. The Bible's word is much more positive, holy, which means set apart. Jewish people vary in their application of the specific commandments of the Bible, but almost universally, when they feel safe to do so, Jews take pride in their identity, history, and traditions. Jews don't actively proselytize, so for that reason, they're often misunderstood. You have to ask them about their history and people, and they'll tell you why it's really good to be a holy people. A fifth reason is prosperity. One of the reasons for anti-Semitism throughout the generations is frankly envy. Jews tend to prosper financially, vocationally, emotionally. The nation of Israel is number 8 on the 2025 list of the top 10 happiest countries in the world, down a few spots from number 5 last year, probably because of the current war. My own interaction with Jewish people, weddings, neighbors and friends, family, travel to Israel, festivals, is that when they're not feeling threatened by outsiders, Jews are very happy about being Jewish and about life in general. You should have seen the party I witnessed in Israel on a day called Simchat Torah, when people were literally dancing with their Hebrew scrolls. Or you could just take a minute and find the lyrics or a YouTube version of the Passover Seder song Dayenu, D-A-Y-E-N-U. Make sure you find an English translation with it. The essence of the 14 verses in this joyful song is that Jews realize they are collectively people who have received one unique blessing from God after another, any one of which would have been enough by itself to create gratitude and happiness. A sixth reason Jews are a big deal is literacy. Historian Paul Johnson says the people of Israel probably produced in sheer quantity the greatest literature of antiquity, of which the Old Testament is only a small fragment. The Israelites were not the only ancient culture that promoted literacy, but then and now the Jews believed in writing, preserving, and passing down written as well as oral history. It's why we know so much about their 4 millennial story and why it's such a big deal. This passion for knowledge, not only knowledge of Torah, but also knowledge in general, is a major reason why the state of Israel is a global leader in technology, medicine, and agriculture. Seventh reason, location. We should be careful to distinguish the Jews as a people from the land and the modern nation of Israel. Land and people. Either topic requires volumes to unpack. But as for the land, if God wanted Israel to be peripheral, he would have gifted the Jews New Zealand or Hawaii. Instead, he placed them at the intersection of 3 continents. This remains the number 1 reason for the land of Israel's prominence in the ancient and modern worlds. The land was underpopulated and underdeveloped for centuries under Turkish and British rule, but it was always inevitable for that piece of real estate to be a geopolitical center as it has become today. Number 8, resilience. The statehood of modern Israel is one of the most astounding comeback stories in this history of nations. It probably wouldn't have happened without a number of related factors, including Jewish migration to the U.S. after the Russian massacre of Jews in the 20th century, again, giving within America a population of people who were advocates for Jews. And related to that, conservative Christianity, sort of on the other end of the political spectrum, conservative Christianity's belief in the future political restoration of Israel, a view known as dispensationalism, which grew rapidly in the early part of the 20th century. And then there was also the 2 world wars and the subsequent consequences, and especially related to that, the Holocaust, which convinced the United Nations that the Jewish people must have their own homeland. There were so many reasons Israel, sort of the miracle of modern Israel, came to be. The resilience of Jews is summarized with a tongue-in-cheek description they use of their own festivals. They tried to kill us. They didn't kill us. Let's eat. Number 9 reason, morality. The Torah sometimes gets a bad rap in the modern world for its sexual mores and punishments, but in part because of the literacy I've already mentioned, the Torah is also the moral foundation of modern society, with its emphasis on, for example, the uniqueness and value of human life, equality before the law, social responsibility, peace, justice, truth, monogamy, the privilege and responsibility of bearing children and being family, contentment, thou shalt not covet, even the need for weekend rest from our labors. As historian Tom Holland writes about Christianity, whose foundation for moral law is Jewish after all, when we fault people of the book for inflicting suffering on others, we're giving a backhanded compliment because the basis on which we judge them is the law they wrote and preserved for the world. The 10th reason that Israel is such a big deal is because of Jesus. Again, I'm mostly giving the Christian perspective here on number 10. Hundreds of would-be Jewish messiahs emerged throughout history, but most of us only know one name, Jesus of Nazareth. Both Christians and Muslims, 55% of the world's population, acknowledge Jesus' unique place in human history. Christ, the root of the word Christian means Messiah. Muslims say Jesus may have been Messiah for the Jews, but their preferred word for Jesus is prophet. Now, as for Jews, some Jews do acknowledge Jesus as Son of God and their Savior and Lord. Still, other Jews say, we're still waiting. We're waiting for Messiah, and Jesus may well be the one we're waiting for in what Christians call his second coming. Most Jews who reject Jesus as Messiah do so for one of three reasons: the Christian doctrine of the Trinity, Christian anti-Semitism through the centuries, and the fact that Jesus didn't right the world, at least not yet. He didn't just not write it for the Jews. He didn't make the world a perfect place either. So the response of Christian apologists to Jewish rejection of Jesus as Messiah points to the cross. God's strategy to transform the world is love, not force, and God doesn't work according to our time and ways. Jesus will come again and finish what he started. Meanwhile, the New Testament answer to the question, why is Israel such a big deal, is that God loved the world so much that he gave his one and only Son, and that Jesus was, is, and will be the fulfillment of God's promises to Abraham, Moses, and David. For Christians, the Jews matter especially because they gave us Jesus, and through Jesus gave us the church. Remember that the early church was almost exclusively Jewish. Gentile believers in Jesus would never have been allowed into the church without Jewish Christians giving them the open door. The metaphor the Apostle Paul uses is that Israel was the original tree with natural branches, and the rest of us are only in because God grafted us into that tree. So I'm well aware there are other angles to this story, and Palestinians and Muslims and Jews and maybe others would have a different perspective on all of this. So I've given you what is my best response to the question of why Israel matters so much. I'd love to have your feedback either in the comments below this YouTube video, or feel free to email me rdbobt.com, rdbobt.com. Thanks for listening.